The doctrine of fascism is very, it's actually, from a philosophical point of view, it's coherent, it's just bonkers. This is where the term totalitarian.
I can't believe the setup for this was about how ridiculous it was that I'm considered on the far right. Oh, yeah. I'm positively embarrassing how some people will refer to me as a far-right figure, you know. Why? Because I like Shakespeare, I want lowered taxes, I love reading Nazis. You choose.
It turns out that the far right now owns almost all of Western cultural capital. Almost all.
This is news to me, I have to say.
Yeah, for years I thought the far right owned nothing, and you know when they were like, "Oh, you're far right," it's like, okay, what does that mean? Well, that means now that I enjoy things, I live a wholesome life, and I work hard, and I try to raise my children in a good and noble way, and I make sure that they've got food on the table, and that all makes me far right. And so the far right, I'm just thinking, well, why are people so down?
No. So the things you've been talking about mostly would label you as a conservative, Sargon. One of the reasons that you're labeled as far right is because you're a pretty out and proud, avowed ethno-nationalist, and yeah, that's the part that people usually identify when they go after you. Also, you know, you think that it's super hilarious to talk about how you wouldn't rape specific women. That one's pretty gross and extreme as well, and you've been doubling and tripling down. It kind of really destroyed and hurt your political career. That was, oof, yeah, didn't work out too good. Yeah, sorry about the old UKIP. But hey, you know, a lot of the shit you wanted to have happen happened. You know, like the Brexit. You got your Brexit. Turns out it was a disaster. Turns out it was a disaster for the country, and even for people who might actually normally be aligned with you. A lot of people are now pretty much realizing how shit that was and how devastating it's been for the British economy. Yeah, turns out that when you really hate brown people and immigrants and a lot of the people who come to your country to do work in jobs that you may not particularly do happen to be by those demographics, and you vilify them and target them, and then you don't permit them to work, it has some devastating effects and can seriously damage elements of your economy. Perhaps you should let immigrants into Britain to work, and you should give them a lot more free passage and not make them not make people think that they're evil rapists who are just coming to Britain to rape people.
On the far right, like seems that it has everything that's good.
Well, apparently, I mean, I often
two pieces of shite on my screen. I don't know who the person on the left is. This is my first appearance. I mean, I'm going to assume that if they're appearing on Sargon of Akkad's show, they're most likely not going to be very progressive. Not going to be a left-wing sounding board.
Joke about myself, you know, a classic liberal Tory. I think taxes are a bit too high. I think 15-minute cities are a load of cobblers. I think net zero is bonkers.
Welcome to the far right, Alan.
I think that, you know, we need to build more houses so that young people can afford to live in one. I mean, this makes me far right, apparently.
Do you occasionally enjoy reading Shakespeare?
Oh, I do.
Did you like Sharp?
Apparently, oh goodness me! I watched Ken Clark's Civilization twice.
And you know how I said in a different segment that it seems like it's just not fair. Like the burden of proof on the right, in terms of like they just get to turn on a webcam and then talk for an hour about their feelings and the people they hate, and then they don't have to be checked on any of the facts or figures or logic. This is another one. Like here, I'm gonna quickly replay that.
Apparently, oh goodness me!
They invent phantoms to battle. They get mad at ghosts. It's like we're gonna make up a thing that people are really trying to oppress us for. And the Shakespeare one is one you hear all the time, because no one on the left is like the minute that you read Shakespeare, that basically prevents communism. You can't read anything, nothing by the bard. Yeah, you're not allowed. No reading. Bad.
I watched Ken Clark's Civilization twice on the BBC and on the ABC in Australia. Those two organisations must also be far right.
Actually, that's exactly what Preventive declared. So before we start, I just want to go through the work we have done on lotuses.com. talking about...
Do they know that Shakespeare used pronouns? Oh, and the most frequent pronoun Shakespeare used was they, them. The dreaded they, them. Uh-oh.
Traditionalism and fascism, because I think this is important, because the term far right is, of course, wildly nebulous. What it is not progressive. That's what they're aiming for. And so we've done a lot of work. Here's the latest piece.
Again, all just nonsense. Like, the left has to do so much extra due diligence to isolate and describe things that we're speaking about at any given time. There's a difference between a Christian nationalist and a Christian fascist. There's a difference between a theocratic fascist. There's a difference between that and the alt-right. There's a difference between that and neo-reactionaries. There's a difference between that and Nazis and neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan. These are different things, are different, yes, and we have to identify them and describe them for what they are. A lot of them have a lot of similar goals, especially if they are specifically to uphold white supremacy. That's usually one of the things that a lot of the far right is doing. So yeah, it's both true that you can oppose a lot of different groups for different reasons.
The symposium, in which
men dressed as women in Shakespeare plays. I know it was non-stop drag performances. That's and nobility would watch such things.
Stelios and Harry talked about Carl Schmitt, who's of course the sort of Nazi philosopher, and how his view of anti-liberalism. I did a piece on the origin and doctrine of fascism. I read Zeev Sternhell's Neither Left Nor Right, talking about the genealogy of... Sorry, you can go along, John. Yeah, so that's Giovanni Gentili's Origin and Doctrine of Fascism.
I do recommend, if you're going to read a Nazi, read
Well, you know, it's often difficult for me to choose. There's just so many Nazis, so many brilliant Nazis, amazing writers, every single one of them. I often am perplexed at the variety of their prose and skill. What the fuck? What is happening?
Schmitt. Don't try to read Heidegger. Heidegger is just incomprehensible.
Yes, yes.
Schmitt was not a boring general sort of philosopher. He was a legal philosopher.
Yeah.
And like the critical race theorists, as you discovered, we had this chat on Twitter the other day, as you discovered, he was trained as a lawyer.
I am 100% uploading this later. It's one hell of So, did you do your homework? How many Nazis did you read? Oh, I couldn't choose my favorite Nazi. There's so many brilliant Nazis to choose from.
Lawyers have to write clearly, because we're all trained. Everybody is.
Yeah, I know. Anyone that isn't progressive is considered far right by the loony left. Anyways, have you been enjoying any Nazis lately? Which Nazis have you been reading? Oh, it's just so difficult to choose you now these days.
As an undergraduate law degree, you're trained to write a client advice, and the basis for client advice is that this person is not a lawyer, so they have to be able to understand it, which is why from the left, the critical race theorists write perfectly clear prose, so you know exactly what they mean, and from the right, Carl Schmitt writes perfectly clear prose. And if you read him, you will know what he says, you will understand exactly what he's getting at, and then you are in a position to disagree.
Yes. Yeah. But the origin
... Now, obviously, I don't want to tell you what to do at home. You decide. It's choose your own adventure, if you will. Yes.
The doctrine of fascism is actually, from a philosophical point of view, it's coherent. It's just bonkers. This is where the term totalitarian.
I can't believe the setup for this was about how ridiculous it was that I'm considered on the far right. Oh, yeah. I'm positively embarrassing how some people will refer to me as a far right figure, you know. Why? Because I like Shakespeare, I want lowered taxes, I love reading Nazis. You choose.
Traditionalism comes from. I've talked about this quite a lot. I made a video a while ago in which I argue that fascism is the inevitable conclusion of socialism, frankly, because I think it is.
So it's the inevitable conclusion of capitalism. So you got the thing. I know it's confusing to a lot of you because that's the word in the thing, and so because they see the same thing, and now I think it's but no, it's capitalism. It was needed the economic precedence of a massive global financial collapse, especially for the conditions that led to it in both Germany and in parts in Italy as well. Yeah, they did not go super socialist. So the Nazis didn't own the means of production, and they didn't live in a communist, like, moneyless, classless society. In fact, the richest amongst them got to consolidate power and become more rich. So it's super capitalism. It sucks because it's super capitalism, and it's also mixed with genocide, and that part's the fucked up thing. But it's the end of the road for the capitalism trying to consolidate its power, and using and doing so militaristically as well. And that's very frightening. That's one of the reasons why you have to fight it and prevent it from happening.
And I think there's a reason that all the fascists were socialists first. We can get to the next one, John. Sorry, yes, I covered Zeev Sternhell's neither left nor right.
Fascists were socialists.
Intellect.
I understand where he's going with this, because certainly there are people who eventually became Nazis who were parts of other groups, whether they were social democrats or liberals. Yeah, the liberals, they went along with the whole rise to fascism thing. That's why there's the old adage, you can never trust the liberals, because eventually they're going to be like, well, I can't really imagine a world in which capitalism isn't the dominating economic superpower, and it's the only thing that makes me feel safe, and it's what we need, so let's just go down this road. It could turn out well for all.
Actual genealogy of fascism, where it came from, Italian syndicalism and French socialism, which seems to be something that you can't really contest. It's obviously come from there. And so this is what have we got to do with the right wing at this point? And by comparison, I've done a lot of work on Scruton.
When someone is calling you a far right individual or a fascist, they aren't saying that this is literally one-to-one identical to World War II. We are living in World War II too. The Second World War II. Different things can be different. It's important to analyze and understand the real history that led to the rise of fascism in order to be able to prevent it. That's the thing.
And Burke. If you go to the next ones, John. Go to the next one. Sorry. So Roger Scruton is just one of the many things that we've done, I think.
Scratch the liberal and the fascist bleeds is the same. Well, that's one of the sayings, but I'm talking about the clip that has actually, I think it's Patrick Stewart, the one and only legend, saying like, no, my dear, you mustn't trust the liberals. They'll always betray you.
And Burke's Reflections on the Revolution of France, which of course is one of those texts that you read if you want to get a good sort of overview of what the sort of
old Whig liberal Toryism, basically the old Whig,
how traditionalism is valuable, right? And so after reading and studying,
just because I don't want us to leave this whole thing without just some basic primers, okay? We're going to go down a learning lesson. In case I know most of you on the left already know all this, but if you happen to be hate watching me right now, this could be beneficial. Fascism is a far right. Already there's some problems with the analysis we've been watching within the first couple words, but I digress. Fascism is a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in natural social hierarchies, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of a nation. And does any of this sound familiar? Is any of this resonating with? Now I get why we're talking about this again, and the strong regimentation of society and the economy. Fascism rose to prominence in the early 20th century Europe. The first fascist movements emerged in Italy during World War I before spreading to other European countries, most notably Germany. Fascism also has adherents outside of Europe, opposed to anarchism, democracy, pluralism, liberalism, socialism, and Marxism. Yeah. So, if you want to oppose all that stuff and you hate it and you like all these other things too, you know, dictatorial leaders, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in national social hierarchies, subordination of the individual interests of the perceived good of the nation and a race, and the strong regimentation of society and the economy to the benefits of the wealthy, by the way. The capitalists, the owning class, those who have the factories and stuff like that. Sure, there's going to be control now by the Nazi party who takes a lot of industries under their wing, but it's not as if they suddenly take all the people's wealth and make them not wealthy anymore, and they don't get to keep making money. If anything, it consolidates the wealthy's power and control. Fascists saw World War I as a revolution that brought massive changes to the nature of war, society, the state, and technology. The advent of total war and the mass mobilization of society erased the distinction between civilians and combatants. A military citizenship arose, and all citizens were involved within the military in some manner. The war resulted in the rise of a powerful state capable of mobilizing millions to serve on the front lines and providing logistics to support them, as well as having unprecedented authority to intervene in the lives of citizens. Fascism, and by the way, the reason I'm using Wikipedia, both it's super fast, free, and it's right here, is that you can't really accuse me of going for some far lefty publication right now, like Counterpunch, or one of the other ones, you know, where people are like, oh, no, this is just communist propaganda, blah, they never won the war. Fascism rejects assertions that violence is inherently bad and views imperialism, political violence, and war as a means to have national rejuvenation. Fascists often advocate for the establishment of a totalitarian one-party state. Again, is everyone recognizing all the check marks? That's why so many people on the left are like, hey, can we shake you? Because a lot of the things are happening, they're advocating for a lot of the same things. Fascists often advocate for the establishment of a totalitarian one-party state and for economy, dirigist. This is a new term to me, sorry. Dirigism is an economic doctrine in which the state plays a strong directive in policies, role contrary to merely regulatory and interventional role of a market economy. As an economic doctrine, dirigism is the opposite of laissez-faire. Okay, stressing a positive role for the state, intervention in curbing productive inefficiencies and market failures. Okay, I didn't know that was the term for it. I'm learning things. Economy with the principal goal of achieving autarky, national economic self-sufficiency through protectionist and economic interventionist policies. Fascism, extreme authoritarianism, nationalism often manifests as a belief of racial purity or a master race, usually blended with some variant of racism or bigotry to other groups that are demonized, such as the Jews. The ideas of motivating fascist regimes to commit genocide, massacres, forced sterilizations, mass killing, and forced deportations. Since the end of World War II, 1945, few parties have openly described themselves as fascist. The term is more often used pejoratively by political opponents. Descriptions of neo-fascists and post-fascists are sometimes employed to describe contemporary parties with ideologies similar to or rooted in 20th century fascist movements. Some opposition to groups have adopted labels anti-fascist or Antifa to signify their stance. Antifa.
I've come to the conclusion that fascism and traditionalism are not just not the same thing, they are in fact opposite things. They operate in totally separate and different ways. Fascism is a form of revolutionary socialism in one nation. Traditionalism is the organic accumulation of cultural goods over time. Fascism is happy to restructure.
Also, by the way, there's a reason fascists are trying to downplay either the severity or the true history of fascism and rewrite it. So, hey, we're not trying to do this thing. We're actually just, you know, we're normal conservatives, we're traditionalists. We want Shakespeare to be taught in schools again. That's what we're really advocating for. This is not about the elimination of trans people from existing. This is ultimately about Shakespeare. We just want a little bit of Shakespeare. That's it. And hey, did you know that fascism is the inevitable result of socialism? Yeah, I know. It might be a historical nonsense, but in service of protecting most likely fascism. But at the same time, it sounds correct when I say it in a British accent.
Society for an a priori goal.
Revolutionary. It's got the shares revolutionary quality.
Exactly. Whereas traditionalism is, of course, the opposite of that. It can't be revolutionary. It can make small adjustments, but never revolutionary changes. And so the method is totally different, even if the aesthetics are similar. So they're totally different things. So calling both of these things far right means that the term far right actually has very little.
And they've been doing this for a long time, by the way. This was the same shit that Crowder was doing, you know? What even is white supremacy? What's a white supremacist? Tucker Carlson does the same thing, too. It's like, do these words have any meaning anymore? It's all, you're a fascist, you're a white supremacist, you're a Nazi because I didn't get my extra foam latte, soy. That's all it is, you know? It's just a whole bunch of soy now.
real
It
right.
empties out the term far right. It's the same.
Your sarcasm is going to get cut out of context. There is no avoiding it. I can't. It's just the life I chose. Like I'm just too annoyed sometimes at Sargon of Accads that I can't help myself. And then the clips do flow. You will get the clips on the Twitter where people are like, "Hey." The fun part is me having to track down where the context comes from, so I can be like, "So if you just added 20 more seconds, you would see that was me doing an impression of the person who I despise."
Problem with collapsing, and I have to say it happens on the left as well. Wokery
It just
into
was hard to watch.
Marxism.
Fair enough.
Yes, they have aesthetic similarities, and yes, they both use that oppressor-oppressed dyad. But one of
He is correct insofar as fascism is directly related from traditionalism, conservatism. The socialism part is wrong, but the revolutionary part is a correct distinction. However, it doesn't mean traditionalists can't be far right because fascism doesn't have a monopoly on the far right. Yeah, one of the things that I think Sargon of Akkad glosses over is the fact that after the French Revolution, there is, of course, a promise, a post, let's say, monarchist dream of liberté, fraternité, égalité, liberty, freedom, solidarity. That dream, as analyzed by several different critical thinkers over the years, both anarchists, socialists, Marxists, communists, is that the system that sets up both mercantile capitalism and various different forms of capitalism that eventually leads to the same capitalist system that evolves time and time again into various other forms, corporate capitalism, industrial capitalism, all those kind of things, it's not creating equality. It's exacerbating the class stratification of society, and that is having detrimental effects to a variety of groups. And that's not even a critique of like making a moral judgment. That's like this. We're not judging whether or not this is a good or bad thing. That's for you to decide. You can figure that out. We're just analyzing it. You know, like it's one of those things where I have to explain. Marx didn't invent the theory of communism, or invent communism, or invent socialism. Like they're observations. They're observations based on real world realities, and it's giving things a material analysis so you can actually analyze the world and history through the viewpoint of, well, what are some driving factors? Is every war a war of like one king wants to rule a kingdom, or one person wants to just conquer the world, or is that the only wars, or there's a lot of control and manipulation of stuff throughout the history of humanity that happens because of material wants, needs, desires, conquests, that kind of thing. So this is important. And when you get someone like Sargon, who eventually has to reach, hey, fascists aren't bad actually, because that's kind of the service of telling everyone an untrue version of it, being like, well, fascists ultimately they were socialists, and it was a socialist rise to power of a whole bunch of socialist ideals. The very things that liberalism, and he's called himself a classical liberal for the most part, democracy. I agree with the liberals there, right? Freedom of religion, I also agree with the liberals there. I think those are two very important tenets of liberalism. That can also encompass traditionalism. People aren't a dot on the political compass. That's the thing that's kind of makes the political compass completely unusable. You could have someone who like agrees with you on every take, and then all of a sudden they're like, and we should lower the age of consent, and then you're like, wait, what? Oh, just really low. Maybe get rid of it. And you're like, no, okay, so you're, I thought I was going to put you there, but now I guess you're yeah, this one's tough. There's not really a category for you. You seem I guess I'll put you with the fascists in that one, but yeah. You like Sun Tzu is an audiobook. His reading is highly recommended. He's well spoken. I have not actually read Sun Tzu, if I'm being totally transparent.
The reasons why some of the loudest complaints about wokery is coming from people who
Wokery.
actually historically had genuine roots in Marxism is because, no, you don't. You are literally, imagine me picking up the glass of water and taking our politics and just tipping it out on the carpet. It's the same thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the main complaints I see from actual modern Marxists is that essentially what woke does is gives cover to the bourgeoisie to claim they're a part of an oppressed.
So I think he's trying to describe class reductionists or people who say that there's no war but class war, and then there's nothing in addition to that. It's just like, yeah, so once we abolish capitalism, comrades, everything will be solved. No, because there's still going to be a lot of racism to be undone and stuff. It'll certainly help if there's a lot more power to workers, because a lot of workers are taken advantage of, and those people can disproportionately fall into racial lines or sexist lines, whatever that is. So that it will be good. But yeah, no. If you have someone who's talking to you about woke shit, or woke being a problem, or calling people woke scolds or stuff like that, I'm guessing you've slipped into maybe like the clown shoe side of the left, who are just like, yeah, so I oppose U.S. imperialism. I'm like, okay, cool, me too. I oppose the military-industrial complex. Cool, me too. I support the Russian war machine. What? I don't really care much for trans people, and I'm pretty sure they shouldn't be allowed in schools and prisons and a whole bunch of what? Well, okay, what's going on here? So, I think you're confused.
Proletariat, by saying, well, look, I may be an owner of the means of production, but I'm also transgender, and therefore I'm part of the oppressors.
Yes.
And it's like, well,
and it's actually a fair point.
It is actually a fair point, actually.
It's a fair point, because the one thing, I mean, Marxism is full of a litany of errors, but the very, very basic early point, which was really, it's not just Marx. I mean, you get this in Polanyi and Engels and other sort of Proudhon and other proto-socialist writers, is that life is actually pretty shit if you don't have any money.
Well, you get that
Great name drops, but do you know anything about what you're talking about? Like, if you, first off, I am begging every single right-winger who wants to talk about Marxism, socialism, communism, at the very least, just read the manifesto. It's like, it's so short, it's practically a pamphlet. It's designed to be mass consumed by a lot of different workers to awaken them to the entirety of his analysis, which you can get into much more detail in other writing. And you don't even have to read fucking every leftist writer, but the fact that it's like, it always comes down to, so socialism is when you hate cash, right? Like do you vomit when you see Scrooge McDuck jump in the money pool? Are you like this? Do you get revolted by that because you hate cash, right? Cash money. You can't stand it. You lefties, you're all revolted by it. And it's like, no, I do not believe you have actually read or understood anything.
conservative writers as well.
As well, yes.
You know.
Well, that's the whole Disraeli, the cloth cap and top hat alliance against the liberals. That's the beginning of One Nation Toryism.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's ironically more in common with the conservatives
Wait, so there's nothing else after that? What the fuck?
on that issue with the Marxists than there is with, you know, the fascists, I suppose we'll just call them. But this is a fairly worthless term that I feel is being bandied around far too much.
And honestly, I'm not going to be able to tolerate any more of this, but the only person who benefits from fascism as a term being completely and utterly worthless, I guess, would be fascists. If you don't want the word to have any meaning, and you don't want there to be any true analysis of your beliefs, then I guess that's what you want, right? It's something self-described Marxists talk to me. I don't feel they've ever actually spoken to Marxists of any sort. Yeah.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojack, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd La Jeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.